Yay, it's Caryn and Aaron!
Hey Caryn, it's Aaron. There were a few things in your video yesterday that kind of offended me. First of all was the fact that your hair is so long and your shirt is so low that it looks like you're topless on camera, which I mean, it's hot, but you know, save it for later, hon. No, but it looks like you're a mermaid and your hair is like all flowing and it reaches that point where it just covers everything up and it's like, ooh, I'm a mermaid. What? Another thing that offended me though was your sister, because she's annoying, but the thing that offended me the most was the fact that you called her retarded. I think we're good enough friends where if I say something offensive, you would call me out on it. So I'm just gonna say you shouldn't say retarded, because like when people say the C word when they're talking about a woman or the N word when they're talking about a black guy, it's just like, yeah, that person might be annoying to you, but I mean, the thing is, you shouldn't call them that word because it is politically incorrect, for one thing. But another thing is that it's mean to say. When someone says the C word when they're talking about a woman, or the N word when they're talking about black people, or people in general, really, they really mean that that person is making them angry in some way, usually. And the thing is, when somebody that is mentally handicapped is making you angry, a lot of the time it isn't their fault. I mean, if somebody calls me the C word, then I probably deserve it, because there's a lot of crap that I do. But if somebody calls me retarded, I mean, you just shouldn't, because for one thing, I'm not retarded. I do have mental capabilities, and the thing is, if I were retarded and you were calling me retarded, you would be stating a fact, but also you would be teasing my mental handicap, and that's just rude. But enough. I am going to tell you about my good news. After I explained to you why I missed that, well, they probably had that speech about why you shouldn't date the person across the hall at orientation, but the thing is, I kind of missed a lot of orientation. See, when my parents and my brother dropped me off here, we were so bored that we just decided to go see a movie. The thing is, if I had known not to date the guy across the hall, I probably wouldn't have a lot of great memories that I do now. And I really like looking fondly on those memories, and I wouldn't give them up for anything, honestly. So that's why I say I can't say never date the boy across the hall, because I have such fond memories of those times, and I wouldn't, even with such heartache attached to it, I wouldn't give them up for anything. But enough on him. I am too stuck on that guy. I'm going to just... no. Okay, so the good news, Caryn, is I got a tattoo. It is a semicolon on my pinky, if you can't see that, and I really like it. I'm very happy that I got it. I went to go get it yesterday, and I had called the people earlier from the tattoo parlor that I went to. They said that because hand tattoos are often more painful and they fade faster, they said that it would probably be around $100. The thing is, when I actually got to the shop though, the guy told me it would be $50, and so that was kind of awesome. The guy sat me down and he asked if it was my first tattoo, and I said yes, and he was like, "You're getting it on your hand?" And I was kind of nervous after he said that, because you know, he gave me that look like, really? Are you sure you want to do this? And at that point I was like, I don't know if I'm sure I want to do this. That sounds really painful if the guy who has a million tattoos is telling me that it's really painful. But I got it anyway, and it did feel like a million little needles being stabbed into my skin, like trying to reach my bone. But, you know, I got a really awesome tattoo, and at least it's awesome in my view. What's interesting, though, is that in all the research that I did before getting my tattoo, you know, finally deciding on what tattoo, where exactly I wanted it, I've wanted this tattoo since I was in the 8th grade. And so I finally get this tattoo, and I did all the research for it. I looked up how to take care of it. I looked up places and pricing and everything. And None of the websites that I went to, none of any of the people that I asked, none of them told me about tattoo etiquette. And when I say tattoo etiquette, I mean that you have to tip. So I go to pay for my tattoo and I give him $60 because I had 320s because I just went to the ATM and they didn't take debit, so I had to go to the ATM beforehand. So I give him the 360s and I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for my change and he's like, so you need 10 back? And I'm like, yeah. So he gives me the 10 and I start to go walk out the door and my friend turns to me and she asked, did you tip him? And I was like, no, was I supposed to? So I turned back around before we left and I went back to him and I was like, okay, so you know how this is my first tattoo, right? I was like, I didn't know you were supposed to tip the tattoo artist and I'm sorry. And he's like, don't worry about it, you go ahead. And so I was like, no, you took my tattoo virginity and I need to pay you for it. So I asked him what would be a good tip. He joked around. He was like, $20 billion. But one of the other guys that was behind him was finally like, okay, well, it was a $50 tattoo, right? And I was like, yeah. And he says, well, $10 would be 20%. And so that's a good tip, right? Like, you tip your waitress, that's a pretty good tip. And so I'm like, so basically I'm giving you your 10 back, but here you go. So I have a really awesome tattoo. And I will take a moment to explain why it is a semicolon. I love English. I love the English language. And English is both a science and an art. A science in that it has structure and rules, and an art in that those rules are very malleable. And the biggest example of that, I would have to say, is the semicolon. While punctuation is something that is very mechanical and very structured, the semicolon is kind of the exception to that. Because the semicolon, it's a very modest punctuation mark and it isn't very often used and goes under a lot of ridicule. English language is both a science and an art. And I love it. I love it entirely. I love it in fiction, in nonfiction, in poetry, in prose, in any sort of fashion. I love English. I love language. I love it when it's written, and I love it when it's spoken. And even though I may not be the best speaker, as you can probably tell from these videos, I do think I am a pretty alright writer. So I do try my best. English is my passion, and so I decided to get a tattoo, and I love it. So there you go, that's the news. I have a tattoo now. And I have really nothing else to say. So I'm gonna say have a good weekend, and I will see you Monday, Caryn.